I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. I am the chosen one.
Any Jewish person who votes Democratic is being, quote, disloyal.
In my opinion, you vote for a Democrat, you're being very disloyal to Jewish people, and you're being very disloyal to Israel.
It was Mr. Trump questioned the loyalty of Jews, a type of attack that anti-Semites often use. The president mentioned it the first time in slamming 2 congressional Democrats who were blocked from entering Israel this month.
When I become president, the days of treating Israel like a second-class citizen will end on day one.
That he amassed an astonishing amount of personal debt in the 90s, nearly $1 billion worth. How is that even possible?
He borrowed more than most other prudent real estate people. He had extended himself to the Trump shuttle, to a yacht, to a helicopter, and to a lot of things which weren't generating any cash flow. And he had to support his lifestyle. So he was in trouble.
When the economy and the real estate market plummeted in 1990, attorney Alan Pomerantz says Trump owed $4 billion to his debtors, including that $1 billion for which he was personally responsible.
Because he personally guaranteed so much debt, the leverage shifted dramatically over to the banks, because it was no longer an issue of a bank and a piece of real estate. It was a bank in Donald Trump's actual survival.
Ross, known as the king of bankruptcy, has known Trump for decades. When Trump's struggling Taj Mahal casino sought bankruptcy protection in the 1990s, Ross helped negotiate a deal with bondholders to keep Trump in charge. Mr. Ross made his fortune buying beaten-down enterprises and reinventing them, oftentimes with modern technology.
Born in Weehawken, New Jersey, Ross earned his undergraduate degree from Yale and later an MBA from Harvard. Not long after that, he was making a name for himself on Wall Street, heading up the bankruptcy unit at Rothschild Investments, a post he held successfully for 25 years. It was during this time that Ross first met Donald Trump. Ross was representing the bondholders threatening to foreclose on Taj Mahal Casino in Atlantic City.
Owners and operators of troubled businesses.
We made the decision that he would be worth more alive to us than dead. Dead meaning in bankruptcy. We don't want him to be in bankruptcy. We want him out in the world selling these assets for us.
So you wanted him alive because he was a salesman and could best sell his own properties.
That's correct. We kept him alive to help us.
Trump owed money all over town. to 72 banks in all. Pomerantz represented them as a group.
How close was he to going personally bankrupt?
Yeah,
They wanted him alive because he was a salesman.
that's correct.
As Commerce Secretary, billionaire investor and Trump advisor Wilbur Ross Jr. will serve as the voice of American businesses within the president's cabinet, helping the new administration navigate the economic challenges of globalization, automation, and digitization.
Do you have a vice presidential candidate in mind?
Well, I really haven't gotten quite there yet.
It's just
Oprah. I love Oprah. Oprah would always be my first choice. Oprah, your competitor, right?
Oprah's competitor.
You know what? I'll tell you, she's really a great woman. She is a terrific woman. She's somebody that's very special.
Or might take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second. just a few moments ago, I signed a memorandum directing the Attorney General to propose regulations to ban all devices that turn illegal weapons into machine guns. I like taking the guns early, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Is America the New Jerusalem? America's most controversial author has now come forth with perhaps his most provocative work yet. An uncensored and fully documented forthright examination based on mainstream sources of the immense power and influence assembled by the Zionist community in America today. In 1994, Michael Collins Piper rocked the world of research into the always news-making topic of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and dared to suggest that the president's murder was a direct consequence of JFK's steadfast refusal to acquiesce to the state of Israel's determined drive to build nuclear weapons of mass destruction. In his 768-page work, Final Judgment, The Missing Link in the JFK Assassination Conspiracy, Piper assembled in page after remarkable page a stunning indictment which laid forth the proposition that Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad, played a key behind-the-scene role in the events in Dallas on November 22, 1963. But remember, the Rothschilds started Israel, okay? They started Israel, so it's Vatican. It's all Vatican. And so thus far, no responsible source has come forth to refute Piper's thesis, which does indeed remain the unchallenged final judgment on the assassination of President Kennedy, the bitterness and hysteria of Piper's critics notwithstanding. In 2004, Piper's book, The High Priests of War, emerged as the first ever full-length work examining the little-known history of the hardline pro-Israel neoconservative network inside the George W. Bush administration and how it achieved its influence, making possible the unprecedented, unprovoked U.S. military attack on a sovereign nation, a war based largely, if secretly, on the premise that the protection of the State of Israel and its imperial ambitions was central to America's own geopolitical interests. The following excerpts are from the book The New Jerusalem, Zionist Power in America by Michael Collins Piper. The same Wilbur Ross, still Jacob Rothschild's right-hand man, came out in support of Trump's nomination in March 2016, while he was working for Rothschild, mind you. Also reported by Bloomberg. Michael Collins Piper, in his book The New Jerusalem, Zionist Power in America, has done an excellent job of describing the relationship between Donald Trump and Resorts International. The following excerpt sums up the relationship. He states, in 1987, Donald Trump purchased his first casino interest when he acquired 93% of the shares in Resorts International. Resorts International has a sordid history, which began in the early 1950s when it evolved from a CIA and Mossad front company, which had been established for the purpose of money laundering the profits from drug trafficking, gambling, and other illegal activities. On October 30th, 1978, the Spotlight newspaper reported that the principal investors of Resorts International were Meyer Lansky, Mafia, Tibor Rosenbaum, I'm assuming he's Mafia also, William Mellon, Hitchcock, David Rockefeller, and one Baron Edmund de Rothschild. So he was in business with these people, okay? With Resorts International, which was a very sketchy outfit. You don't get let in that club unless you're in the club, right? And 1978 is the year that Pope John Paul I was murdered. So that's really interesting. Not too far from this particular date. What Trump doesn't tell his readers is what the late Andrew St. George reported in the Spotlight on October 30th, 1978, and in the previous September 25th, 1978 issue. Resorts International was established and controlled by frontmen for the Rockefeller and Rothschild's family. And he was able to buy into this company, okay? What does that tell you? And they're enforcers in the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and its allied intelligence agency, Israel's Mossad. What made the report so explosive was that the newspaper pointed out that the illegally rigged casinos were being operated with the collusion of respectable politicians law enforcement officials, Wall Street financiers who floated loans to finance the gambling resorts, and the high-profile gambling resort operators themselves. St. George pointed out that many of these casino resorts run by the mob through a variety of frontmen have actually been engaged in a de facto partnership with behind-the-scenes mobsters who have assisted the CIA and the Mossad in massive laundering of drug and gambling money. St. George pointed out that many of these casino resorts run by the mob through a variety of frontmen have actually been engaged in a de facto partnership with behind-the-scenes mobsters who have assisted the CIA and the Mossad in massive laundering of drug and gambling profits that have been channeled into covert operations of the two allied intelligence agencies. In return, the CIA and the Mossad, using their own influence, have provided protection for the illegally fixed gambling operations, preventing law enforcement authorities from cracking down on this corruption. This is supposed to be our government, the CIA. We fund them with our tax dollars. Where does would-be President Trump fit into the picture? To find the answer, one must turn to the murky origins of Resorts International. Evolved from a CIA front company set up in the early 1950s by then CIA Director Allen Dulles. He was a big Rockefeller guy, who was just another minion of Rothschild, and his close associate, three-term New York Governor Thomas E. Dewey, political functionary, so-called Rockefeller Republican wing of the GOP. Yeah, right. The front company in question was the innocuously named Mary Carter Paint Company, which operated a national chain of paint stores, but was set up to function as a covert CIA money laundering operation. But they want to know when you take $500 out of your bank account, right? In 1958 to 59, Dewey and a number of associates used a reported $2 million in CIA funds to buy a controlling interest in the Crosby Miller Corporation, headed by Dewey friend James Crosby, which was then merged with Mary Carter. Among other things, the new corporation laundered CIA money for arming the anti-Castro Cuban exiles. The company also launched into lucrative casino gambling enterprises in the Caribbean, where the CIA was quite active during that period, having engaged the Lansky crime syndicate in now thoroughly documented and widely known plots to topple Fidel Castro, who had enraged the mob by closing down its Cuban gambling enterprises. So that's what our, CIA and that are doing, is they're running around helping the mob. Well, they're all Catholic, they're all Jesuits, so why not? Thus, it should be no surprise that in 1963, Alvin Melnick, a top henchman of crime syndicate boss Mayor Lansky, was found to be closely connected to the operations of Mary Carter Paint. In 1963, Mary Carter Paint spun off its paint division, and during the next several years began developing its casino operations, particularly in the Bahamas. In 1967 through 68, Mary Carter Paint officially changed its names to Resorts International and began massive international expansion. Spotlight determined that several principal investors provided the funds and assets for the venture. Meyer Lansky, the acknowledged chairman of the board and chief financier of the underworld gambling syndicate, and don't think Donald Trump couldn't get into that gambling syndicate without being in the club, who maintained his own long-standing ties to not only Israel and the Mossad, but also the CIA and the American intelligence community. So you've got, Rothschild, Israel, Mossad, plus you've got, the Jesuits, because the CIA are the Jesuits and the mob is the Vatican. So you see the link here between Israel and the Vatican. It's all one. It's all one. The Investors Overseas Service, IOS, then the world's largest flight capital conglomerate, controlling assets worth $2.5 billion. Tibor Rosenbaum, who was not only the Mossad Swiss bank chief financier behind covert arms deals, but also the head of the Banque de Credit International of Geneva, the Lansky syndicate's chief. I mean, These are Donald Trump's friends, and he was sitting in our White House for 4 years, and you wonder why everything went to hell, okay? And you want to believe he's going to save you next time. Are you kidding me? But European money laundering and Baron Edmund de Rothschild of the European banking family and a personal business partner of Rosenbaum in Rosenbaum's Mossad-related ventures ranging far and wide. And lastly, the Rothschilds are one of the few people that use the word Baron. Why do you think Trump named his son Baron? Isn't that a coincidence? Okay? It's very tied into this family. And they are the New World Order. He is the New World Order, okay? That's what this is all telling you. William Mellon Hitchcock, one of the heirs to the Mellon family fortune, one of America's largest private family fortunes, which for many years has also maintained close ties with the CIA. Resorts International expanded by leaps and bounds and soon became one of the most profitable of all gambling enterprises. And by 1970, the underworld figures who were running the casinos in league with their behind-the-scenes partners began moving to expand casino gambling in the United States. Mob Chief Lansky called a high-level meeting of gambling syndicate figures in Acapulco, Mexico, and there the assembled mobsters pinpointed the fading resort of Atlantic City as their first new target. Prior to that time, of course, the mob had already established Nevada as the only outpost of legalized gambling on U.S. soil. In the wake of this meeting, the resources of Resorts International were used, publicly and privately, to begin the lobbying campaign that resulted in the legalizing of gambling in Atlantic City. And once the New Jersey legislature opened up the Garden State, Resorts moved in. In 1987, upon the death of longtime CIA frontman James Crosby, the nominal head of Resorts International, up-and-coming young New York real estate tycoon Donald Trump stepped in to the picture and bought Crosby's interest in the gambling empire. And 1987 was the year that Donald Trump flew to Moscow to Red Square and talked to the honchos in Moscow. Okay? Do you think that's a coincidence? All of a sudden he's being led into the gambling empire and they're all rolling out the red carpet for him? No, they got to set up their guy. You know, they're going to set him up to be wealthy now. And right after that, Oprah Winfrey, early in 1988, had him on her show and said, "Do you think you'll ever run for president?" And then later he was on Larry King's show, and Larry King asked him, "Well, who would you have be your VP?" And he said, "Oprah." Isn't that weird? And with their help, Trump soon became a household name, with his colorful personality and his insistence upon naming a variety of luxury hotels, apartments, houses, and other commercial ventures after himself, because he was the Trump man. But while the name Trump appeared in the headlines, the names of the real movers behind Resorts International remained hidden from public view. Let us continue from where the book left it. After quickly expanding the reach of Resorts International to Atlantic City in the final years of the 80s, Donald Trump found himself in financial trouble as the real estate market in New York tanked. The 3 casinos in Atlantic City, like other Trump assets, were under threat from lenders. It was only with the assistance and assurance of Wilbur Ross Jr., Senior Managing Director of Rothschild, Inc., that Trump was allowed to keep the casinos and rebuild his threatened empire. This was detailed in a Bloomberg article from March 22, 1992. The connection between Baron Edmund de Rothschild, being one of the original principal investors of Resorts International and Rothschild, Inc., allowing Donald Trump to retain ownership over the Atlantic City casinos, which saved him from bankruptcy, should not be considered a coincidence. Donald Trump landed on his feet when, ironically, the real estate market in New York turned and his wealth increased dramatically once more. From there, the Trump empire continued to roll forward and eventually expanded its brand into the realm of reality television, the newest method of socio-economic and cultural engineering. For those wondering, Wilbur L. Ross Jr. spent 24 years at the New York office of Rothschild, Inc. So he was a right-hand man of Rothschild, and just some guy that worked at Rothschild. In the late 1990s, he started a $200 million fund at Rothschild Inc. to invest in distressed assets. In 2000, on April Fool's Day, Ross raised an additional $450 million to invest in troubled companies. The timing of this strategy could not have been better, as this report from New York Magazine stated. The 2000-2001 rolling stock market crash, 9/11, and globally synchronized recession pushed scores of companies into bankruptcy. New economy high flyers like Enron, WorldCom, and Global Crossing went bust, but so did old economy stalwarts in industries like steel and assets under the banner International Coal Group. During the recession, so he set this up in 2000, and then we had all of this happen in 2001. The towers. Did they just do that so he could just buy everything up for nothing? Obviously, he knew ahead of time because 1 year before he did this. This man is just such a hardcore criminal. During the recession, Ross took control of troubled banks in England, Greece, and Cyprus. Soros works for them too, by the way. So his bankrupting things and taking advantage was just working for Rothschild. He was also part of a group that acquired a 35% stake in the Bank of Ireland during the height of England's 2011 debt crisis. See, they set up these crises and then they're ready to catch everything as it falls. He sold the last of his stake in 2014 during nearly tripling his initial investment. And they give links here to Forbes and other sites. In one of those strange coincidences, Wilbur Ross owns an apartment at River House in New York. Other occupants of River House are Henry Kissinger and Sir Evelyn de Rothschild, Queen Elizabeth's financial advisor. Ross's profile on Investopedia as of 2018. Wilbur Ross Jr. is a millionaire investor who spent a quarter century working as a bankruptcy restructuring advisor for Rothschild Investments. In the early 1990s, he helped a struggling casino magnate, Donald Trump, whose Atlantic City properties were bankrupt, and whose net worth was estimated at negative $1.4 billion. Trump held that it was positive $1.5 billion, but I think they would know. To hold on to his stake in the Taj Mahal and keep his name on the sign, the Trump name added value to the casino. Ross, then senior managing director of Rothschild, told Bloomberg in 1992. On November 30, 2016, Trump's transition team confirmed reports that Ross 79 had been tapped for Secretary of Commerce. He was confirmed by the Senate on February 27th, appointed by Donald Trump. Ross took on a dizzying array of responsibilities at the Commerce Department, including running the Census Bureau, the National Weather Service, and the Bureau of Economic Analysis. His main task is directing trade policy, and on this front he has echoed Trump's rhetoric, calling for the U.S. to free itself from the bondage of unfavorable trade agreements. Probably unfavorable to Rothschild, right? In a joint op-ed with Trump's economic policy advisor, Peter Navarro, in July, Ross criticized previous governments on their trade negotiations. When our politicians and diplomats negotiate trade deals, we lose because they don't want a good deal from a bad one. They wrote, the op-ed went on to criticize the Clinton administration and its handling of the North American Free Trade Agreement. While both are billionaire investors, Ross represents a sharp break from his predecessor, Penny Pritzker, who pushed for a now-defunct Trans-Pacific Partnership and other free trade deals. Known as the king of bankruptcy, or less flattering still, a vulture investor, Ross has specialized in buying up distressed assets and turning them around. He left Rothschild in 2000 when the tech crash.
robbers opened fire at a kosher supermarket and killed 4 innocent souls, including a brave police officer who faced down the shooter and very bravely faced the shooter down. With one heart, America weeps for the lives lost. With one voice, we vow to crush the monstrous evil of anti-Semitism whenever and wherever it appears. And we're working very hard on that. And I can tell you that we have a lot of people in government working very hard. But today we're taking sign an executive order to combat anti-Semitism. This action makes clear that Title VI of Civil Rights Act, which prohibits the federal funding of universities and other institutions that engage in discrimination, applies to institutions that traffic in anti-Semitic hate. So this is a very powerful document that we're signing today.
Christians in America have conceded under pressure. I travel enough and interact enough around the world to know that Christianity globally is under tremendous pressure. Now, they're hunting Christians in many parts of the world, and we're not doing that in the States yet. But there is certainly pressure on Christianity in the public arena, and I think we have conceded the field for too long, imagining that being conciliatory would win us friends and allies. And I think that's a myth. I think they've understood our willingness to yield as weakness, and we're going to have to find our voice and be at least as assertive with what we believe as we see other ideologies being in our culture. This is our heritage. As a nation, we have a Christian heritage. How dare you or anybody else tell me I don't have the right to express it in this generation? If we said that to the Native Americans, we would say you were a bigot and filled with hate, that they have a right to their heritage, and I agree with that. But we as Christians have a right to our heritage in this nation. And anyone that threatens that is a bigot and expressing hatred. And we've got to find the courage to stand up and say that.
Thank you very much. Henry Kissinger has been a friend of mine. I've liked him, I've respected him, but we've been friends for a long time, long before my emergence in the world of politics, which has not been too long. But we have been really in the, I guess you'd say, the New York seat a little bit, but we got to know each other very well. He's a man I have great, great respect for. Henry Kissinger has been a friend of mine. I've liked him, I've respected him, but we've been friends for a long time. Thank you very much. Henry Kissinger has been a friend of mine. I've liked him, I've respected him, but we've been friends for a long time. Henry Kissinger has been a friend of mine. I've liked him, I've respected him, but we've been friends for a long time. We're living in a time and age that we never thought possible before. And we've got to come together, not only as a nation, but as a world community. And we've got to come together, not only as a nation, but as a world community. And we've got to come together, not only as a nation, but as a world community. He's got enough problems. She goes, what about Soros? Let's talk about somebody else. Okay, ready? He's got enough problems. She goes, what about Soros? Let's talk about somebody else. Okay. He's got enough problems. She goes, what about Soros? Let's talk about somebody else. Okay, ready? Great before the election. Nah, we don't care.
If you couldn't really decipher that, there were plans to lock her up from the audience, and he said, "No, we don't care." That was before the election.
That plays great before the election. Nah, we don't care. That plays great before the election. Nah, we don't care.
Maxwell. You said, quote, "I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, but I wish her well, whatever it is." Mr. President, Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested on allegations of child sex trafficking. Why would you wish such a person well?
I don't know that, but I do know that
she has. She's been arrested for that.
Her friend or boyfriend,
Epstein,
was either killed or committed suicide in jail. She's now in jail.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I wish her well. I'd wish you well. I'd wish a lot of people well. Good luck. let them prove somebody was guilty. I mean, do you know that?
Oh, so you're saying you hope she doesn't die in jail? Is that what you mean by wish her well?
Her boyfriend died in jail, and people are still trying to figure out how did it happen? Was it suicide? Was he killed? And I do wish her well. I'm not looking for anything bad for her. I'm not looking bad for anybody. And they took that and
she's
made
a child
it
sex, alleged child sex
such a
trafficker.
big deal. But all it is her boyfriend died. He died in jail. Was he killed? Was it suicide? I do. I wish her well.
favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favorite Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me it's very personal. You don't want to get into it.
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Verse that you like.
I don't want to do that. I mean,
Old Testament guy or New Testament guy?
Probably equal. It's just incredible. The whole Bible is an incredible. I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
The Abraham Accords, according to the Palestinian Authority, said it was a total betrayal by the UAE. And think about it. Do we really want unification of Israel with the Middle East to just empower Israel? That's what Trump did. He gave Netanyahu, Israel, really more power by building them together with the UAE and other Middle East countries. Hamas reacted as expected, saying the agreement served the Zionist narrative. They would know better than anybody. So Donald Trump actually set up the problems that we're seeing now in Gaza with the Palestinians. And they feel that they should have anti-normalization, not unification with Israel. And it's certainly not something we want either. We don't want to see a more powerful Israel. But that's all Trump spent his 4 years doing. He didn't do our agenda. He was working for them. There's just no question about it. According to a poll by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, 80% of Palestinians described their feelings towards the Abraham Accords as treason, abandonment, and an insult. Now, why was Donald Trump meddling in the Middle East affairs? Because he's working for Israel. Okay? He's working for the Zionists, which are connected to the Vatican, because he's obviously very big into the Vatican as well, and the Catholic. The Vatican's run by the Jews, okay? It's been proven. Years ago, probably from the beginning, they took it over. But this is just, this is not something in America's interest. How is this in America's interest? To unify Israel with the Middle East. That is not in our interest whatsoever. It just makes Israel more powerful and connected. And since Islam, is said to be by many knowledgeable people created by the Vatican. It's just a unification of power. That's all it is. And it's not pro-American power. It just shows that he was running his Jesuit agenda while in our White House pretending to work for us. And that's why they can't be in office, because they take vows to us, but their vows are somewhere else. Which is why we see politician after politician that tell you everything you want to hear until they get in office, and then they do something else.
I was very, very honored, very honored when I heard that President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming today, and I think it's appropriate to say, and I'd like you to stand up. I'd like you to stand up. And honestly, there's nothing more I can say, because I have a lot of respect for those two people. And honestly, there's nothing more I can say, because I have a lot of respect for those two people. So thank you all for being here. And honestly, there's nothing more I can say, because I have a lot of respect for those two people. So thank you. My Attorney General, to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation, because there has never been so many lies, so much deception. There has never been anything like it, and we're going to have a special prosecutor. When I speak, I go out and speak. The people of this country are furious. In my opinion, The people that have been long-term workers at the FBI are furious. There has never been anything like this where emails and you get a subpoena, and after getting the subpoena, you delete 33,000 emails. And then you acid wash them or bleach them, as you would say, a very expensive process. So we're going to get a special prosecutor and we're going to look into it because you know what? People their lives have been destroyed for doing 1/5 of what you've done. And it's a disgrace. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
You know, it's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.